Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is what if Naruto became op and formed a harem with Ino, Anko, Temari, and Kurenai, Part 3. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Kami, this is not good Jiraiya. Sarutobi Hiruzen murmured as he interlocked his fingers with his elbows resting on the aged desk that had been present since the reign of the first Hokage. The Toad Sage nodded in agreement. I know, not only that, but we have a week at best. In the worst case scenario, we have a few days. Itachi was only able to contact and warn me a few days ago. The Sandaime frowned. They are moving faster than I would have thought for an organization that just recently appeared on the radar. Agreed, but that doesn't mean they weren't preparing beforehand for their coming out party. Anta said, radar. Jiraiya pointed out, true. So, Jiraiya gazed at his sensei intently. What's our plan? I've been thinking about it constantly while I was on my way here, and I couldn't think of a way for this to blow over smoothly without exposing Itachi as our spy and keeping the Gaki safe. Sarutobi inhaled a long drag from his pipe before exhaling. On a side note, you should stop smoking, it's incredibly bad for your lungs, you know. Jiraiya noted with a slightly amused expression. The Sandaime barely responded with a grunt before speaking. This is indeed a dangerous situation we're playing in. An idea suddenly popping into Jiraiya's head, the Toad Sage spoke with hope. Perhaps we bring Inara into this conversation. Shikaku can be trusted, right? Sarutobi shook his head. The less people that know, the better. Only you and I will be aware of this situation, perhaps with the addition of one more. Who? Kakashi Hatake. Jiraiya frowned. I understand that he's trustworthy, but what's different from bringing him into the conversation? I believe that Shikaku would offer more to the table. Shikaku is Inara and he could come up with a more safer and reliable. Ah, that is because you're under the impression that Kakashi would be contributing ideas to the plan. No, my dear wayward student, that is not the case. Sarutobi grinned. Jiraiya's frown deepened as his brows furrowed in confusion. Then what is the purpose of Kakashi being brought in? He is the plan. Now tell me, what do you think of this plan? Jiraiya leaned his large frame forward and paid rapt attention to his sensei's words. His eyes widened at every passing word that exited the Sandaime's mouth. That could just work. Knocking out two birds with one stone, I suppose. Jiraiya muttered to himself before gazing back at his aged teacher. But, that idea, it isn't without its risks. It could affect the Gaki more than you know. Especially because of the fact we don't know if Itachi can go through with it. Even if he does go through with it, we don't know how he would proceed about this. Naruto has an amazing power of will, and the will of fire burns brightly within him. He will be fine. Hiruzen interrupted his student. I don't doubt that, but he isn't an adult. He's just a child. He doesn't have the experience of a hardened shinobi. Hell, even a hardened shinobi would have a difficult time with this. Jiraiya argued back. That may be, but he's been through more than 99% of Konoha. He will be able to handle this. Of this, I am positive. Sarutobi replied with no waver or hesitance. Mark my words, sensei, this will affect him. For better or for worse, we'll see in time. Just ask yourself this, will it be worth it? Sarutobi sighed and looked up in contemplation. This was a pretty big gamble. He looked at his longtime friend and student. Go, inform Itachi immediately. I'll tell Kakashi what's to happen. Jiraiya grumbled about senile old men losing their minds before reluctantly exiting the office for his assigned task. Like many times before, Sarutobi Hiruzen looked up to the skies and pondered. Ancestors of the Great Leaf, am I doing the right thing? Naruto frowned as he sat cross-legged with Sake-chan in his lap while his hand absent-mindedly petted her head. In front of him was his taijutsu teacher of nearly half a year now. However, there was no training to be done today. In fact, there seemed to be a change of plans, permanently. Next to his taijutsu instructor was a man who had spiky silver hair oriented to his left side, dark gray eyes. The man seemed to be in a pleasantly relaxed state, if his weird smiling eye and heavy-lidded expression was anything to go by. Along with the gravity-defying hair was a face mask that covered the majority of his face. The man had only one eye visible, seeing as to how his Hitai-8 was slanted to cover the other viewing orbital. Naruto gazed at the silver-haired man impassively as the cycloptic shinobi returned his gaze with a happy, U-shaped eye smile. It was weird, but it was the only way the blonde could describe it. The blue-eyed boy shifted his attention to Guy when the taijutsu specialist cleared his throat. So, my dear youthful student, how is your day today? Naruto narrowed his eyes with suspicion when he noted that Guy-sensei spoke with a nervous tint in his tone. It's going fine, sensei. Aha, most splendid, my youthful student. Sensei, who is this guy next to you? Why is he here? Naruto interrupted blatantly. No sense of beating around the bush, he had several theories as to why the silver-haired cycloptic Junin was here. Kakashi decided to opt in the conversation to answer instead of his exuberant comrade, Yo. My name is Kakashi Hatake and I'll be taking over as your sensei starting from today. Naruto's response came without hesitation. No. Guy sighed, he knew that Naruto wouldn't ease into this situation smoothly. Once he grew attached to something or someone, he was hard-pressed into letting any change into his life that involved his precious attachments, so to speak. To be honest, Guy didn't want to have over his gritty and determined student, but the Hokage ordered otherwise. Guy frowned. It was strange though, initially, the plan was to have Kakashi become the main instructor while he himself became more of a side teacher. In addition to that, this plan wasn't to be effective until the summer, which was several months away. So that begged the question, why did the Hokage abruptly push the plans forward? Guy shook his head, he would trust in his village leader's decision. Getting back to reality, the man clad in green saw Naruto scowling at him and Kakashi. His silver-haired comrade in the meantime looked bored and happy at the same time. Weird. Hoping that he could diffuse the tension slightly, Guy walked over to the blonde and squatted down to eye level. Ah, my dear youthful student. HMPH. Naruto scowled, like you can call me that anymore. If I heard correctly, and I know I did, you just got rid of me like trash. Naruto shouted. Sake barked in agreement. She didn't really know what was going on, but if her blonde-owned was upset at people, then she too would be upset at people. Guy suddenly started crying out waterfalls as Naruto folded his arms across his chest defiantly. His little overdramatic act will take no effect on him. Nope. Not today. My student. I have failed you. Just know this. I never wanted this. Blame the silver-haired man. Guy wailed as he pointed a furious finger at Kakashi. Then why would you let him take me? He briefly looked at the silver-haired man now identified as Kakashi. I'm still not training with you, before turning back to Guy. If you really didn't want to, you could prevent it. Actually, you know what? I'll talk to Gigi right freaking now. Kakashi decided now was the time to interject. Do you even wish to be a shinobi? Drawled out Kakashi in a bored fashion. Naruto turned a glare to the silver-haired man. Why does it matter to you? I repeat, do you wish to be a shinobi? Kakashi asked again, only this time his tone of voice that of a stern one. The whiskered boy maintained the same glare as he answered, of course I want to be a shinobi, why else would I stay in the academy? The blonde child scoffed before continuing in a rather scathing tone, you think I go to a shinobi academy because I like being bullied and ignored by the teachers? Kakashi internally winced, but he had to straighten Naruto out now. Then listen boy, you will be training underneath my tutelage. This is on direct orders from the Hokage himself. If you truly and seriously aspire to be a shinobi, you don't question the leader of your village, understand? Naruto gritted his teeth. He knew the man was right, but that didn't mean he had to like it. The blue-eyed Jinchuriki stood up, whatever. But as he went to stand, he had briefly caught a glimpse of his taijutsu instructor's face to see that it was eerily impassive with a hint of disappointment at him. Why the hell does he disappointed in me? Naruto seethed internally as he walked away with Sake-chan trailing loyally behind him. His gaze softened as he looked back at his puppy looking at him with eagerness. He picked her up and nuzzled against her affectionately. Well, Sake-chan, look like it's you and me for now. As he neared the exit of the training ground he'd been asked to meet his sensei in, he hinged into a familiar woman who was dressed in all black for what seemed to be a funeral or mourning service. He needed to vent to someone and he didn't feel like talking to anyone who could reprimand him. He walked the path that he's seen Sakura-chan and Ino-chan take many times before. Ino blew out a bored breath as she manned the register while her parents were on lunch. She swung her legs aimlessly as she spun slowly upon the rotating seat of the stool. She was humming a light tune when she heard the doorbell ring, signifying a person had just opened the door. Hi, welcome to Yamanaka Flower Shop. The stop you can get everything flower related to, Ino suddenly gasped. In the midst of her routine greeting, she had finally identified the person and realized it was someone who was familiar with her late sensei, Yui sensei. Yui looked startled, as if she wasn't expecting anyone to recognize her. Yui quickly schooled her features and returned a small sad smile. Hello Ino-chan, how've you been? The 10-year-old Yamanaka heiress suddenly let loose every detail of her life for the past 2 weeks and how lame the academy's new teachers were. Ino didn't even register the slight wince of the elder female occupant of her family store at the mention of the academy teachers. After all, she hasn't seen Yui-sensei since, well, her other sensei's death, and Yui-sensei was a well-loved teacher at the academy. It was only natural for a natural gossip girl like Ino to blabber incessantly about random things carelessly. After all, she was just a 10-year-old girl. Although she was only 10, even she wasn't insensitive to a person's feeling. She realized that several minutes into her non-stop chatter, she had mentioned Iruka-sensei proxy, the topic of the academy. She quickly ceased her words and began sputtering out an apology in a panicked fashion. It was widely known that Yui-sensei and Iruka-sensei had been close, intimately. Oh my kami. I'm so sorry sensei. I didn't mean to. G gomenasai Yui-sensei. Ino frantically rushed out. Ino-chan, it's okay. Actually, I was on my way to see Iruka-sensei now. Slaam. Ino screamed as someone shoved Yui violently into the ground. The figure then headed towards her and hovered around her form protectively. Ino's terrified scream shifted into a relieved sigh before she angrily pushed the person who shoveled her academy teacher. Daddy, why did you push Yui-sensei? Ino interrogated as she headed over to her teacher. Ino, stop. Be quiet and get back here. Inoichi spoke within a tone that resonated authority as he narrowed his eyes at the form of Yui, picking herself up. Daddy, what's wrong? The clan heiress froze in place as she heard the tone of voice of her father. Instead of answering her, the Yamanaka clan head pierced the woman in front of him with a glare. Who are you? Inoichi interrogated. Yui, dusted herself, often spoke in a calm voice. What are you talking about? Your daughter knows who I am, isn't that right Ino-chan? Before his daughter could nod in affirmation, Inoichi spoke in a hard voice. Do not play games with me. Yui Hadoka left the village weeks ago after the death of one Yumino Ir. Wouldn't be good to reveal the death of a Konoha shinobi, certain circumstances. Shock displaying on both Yui's and Ino's face, Inoichi decided to take their stunned moment to activate his clan jutsu. Placing his hand in his signature clan hand sign, he held it up and aimed at a slightly bewildered Shintenshin number jutsu, mind transfer jutsu. Inoichi smirked. Jutsu success. He briefly thought as his conscience was pulled towards the pseudo Yui. Ino groaned as she rushed forward to try and somewhat successfully support her father's falling form. You better hurry up daddy. Inoichi groaned. Usually the process of entering someone's mind was a fluid and smooth transition, but going into this now known obvious imposter was all but that. The reason the Yamenka clan head knew this was an imposter was because Inoichi had interviewed quite a number of shinobis via his family jutsu, and Yui Hadoka was one of the shinobi that had fallen under his routine checks. The Yamanaka clan leader managed to gather enough of his bearings to finally note his environment. Drip. Inoichi frowned as he felt a drop of liquid splat against his cheek. The long-haired pale blonde man cautiously moved forward at a sedate pace. After all, a mind could be the single most dangerous tool a person could possess, and from the looks of it, this mind felt ominous and oppressive. This was most definitely not a normal mind. Drip. As a Konoha shinobi and an XT&I torture and interrogation head, he had a duty to find out if this imposter could or would pose a danger to Konoha as a whole. So with great caution, Inoichi pressed forward. Drip. Nearly half an hour of walking around, Inoichi began theorizing a suspicion about his whereabouts. He had heard that Jinchurikis had a crazy mindscape and that normal applications of mind and body invasive jutsus would not work and wasn't advised to be used against demon containers. Feeling a bit worried now, Inoichi was thinking about cutting his losses and exiting. After a few moments, the clan leader believed this to be mindscape of their own Jinchuriki, one Naru. Welcome Ninjin. Inoichi paled. He turned around from where he came from with great trepidation. He was sure that's where the seemingly ancient voice came from, but how could that be? He had just came from that direction. The deep and menacing voice chuckled, "Silly Ninjin, if I do not wish to be found, I will not be found." The clan leader of the Yamanakas found himself sweating as his gaze fell upon a giant barred cell. Behind the colossal metal barring glowed two giant murderous red eyes. The elder blonde stepped back fearfully as the key, killer intent, rolled off the being inside the bar in droves. "Please, I do not wish for any trouble." "Quiet Ninjin," the ancient entity snarled, "you had acquired trouble the moment you used your blasphemous technique." Inoichi found himself unable to talk as the key intensified exponentially. Stepping out of the shadows, the owner of the powerful and feral voice revealed itself to be what Inoichi feared to be. The infamous Kyuubi no Kitsune. "I grow bored of you Ninjin. Leave or I shall do what I did to your ancestors when they foolishly interacted with my presence." The Kyuubi spoke in a lazy fashion. Inoichi ignored the jab at his ancestors and nodded immediately. The clan leader went to leave before he paused. He realized he had no idea on how to get out. If he knew how to get out, he would have gotten out sooner when he had an inkling as to what he had gotten himself into. He turned to ask the malevolent chakra entity only to flinch violently as the Kyuubi roared with loudness that rivaled a crowd of a trillion. The furious roar propelled him out of the mindscape abruptly. The Kyuubi smirked viciously. "Soon, the nations will be reminded of the prowess and presence of the greatest of tailed beasts." Inoichi sat upright abruptly and gasped as he woke up in his own body. He immediately patted himself in a reassuring manner, hoping that nothing was out of place or anything of that sort. He looked around for his daughter and saw that she was now tending to a young blonde boy, and he narrowed his eyes. "Uzumaki Naruto." The aforementioned child groaned as he regained consciousness. Where the hell am I and who the hell are Yo Ino-chan?" Naruto nearly yelped as he realized his head was in Ino's lap. "Oh geez. I'm sorry Ino. I didn't even know what happened. One moment I'm buying flowers and the next thing I know is that I'm waking up with my head in your lap." Naruto blabbered speedily in fear of getting hit. "Naruto. It's fine." Ino giggled. "Besides, you look cute when you sleep." Naruto's face burned as he sputtered his response, "Oh. You thank you. I also think, why that you're also." Inoichi decided to intervene now. Demon container or not, no one was going to be putting the moves on his daughter if he could help it. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's attention shifted straightaway from the heiress of the Yamanaka clan to the leader of said clan. His eyes widened as he realized he wasn't in his henge of Yui-chan. A barely visible tremble only noticed by Inoichi indicated that he was in a slight state of fear. Naruto's azure eyes fearfully darted around as he tried to pinpoint a way to avoid this situation. Inoichi's gaze softened at the sight of an obviously scared boy that was thrown into a situation that wasn't his fault. He sighed, "Naruto-san, may I ask you why you were henged into another person? Impersonation is a crime that can be punished harshly by authority." Ino looked fear-stricken as she let out a startled cry, "Daddy! You can't get Naruto in trouble." Inoichi gave his daughter a stern look and spoke in a voice that left no room for argument, "Ino-chan, to your room, now." The clan heiress gave Naruto a sympathetic and apologetic look. "I'm sorry Naruto, I'll make this up to you later." With a slight glare directed at her father, Ino flipped her hair and let out a slightly haughty, "HMPH." Before obeying his order and heading out the back door of the shop. Naruto didn't even register her words as his slight tremble became more obvious. Was Ino's dad going to hurt him now that Ino was gone? So caught up in his fear, he didn't even think to use any jutsus to escape his predicament. He just froze. Naruto felt the frustration of being helpless build up as his chest shuddered more heavily. "It's okay Naruto-san, I do not wish to hurt you. I would just like to know why you impersonated a fellow Konoha resident." Inoichi spoke with a soft gaze and voice to try and get his honest intent across, to show that the boy was not in danger. Inoichi's attempt at reassurance seemed to have worked since the boy's tense and frightened state subdued into a relaxed state. Inoichi offered a small smile. Would you like some food, Naruto? He purposefully addressed him by his first name only. This served to establish a familiarity that would hopefully lull the boy into a more trustful state. "NN no tea, thank you, Inoichi-sama." Naruto managed to squeak out. Inoichi couldn't help but chuckle at the politeness the blonde child showed under the duress of what the scared child considered to be a predicament. "No need to address me so formally here, Naruto-san. In the home of our compound shop it will always be safe." Naruto chose to respond with a small nod before a small frown made its way onto his face. An internal conflict began as curiosity and his natural instinct to survive clashed. Should he run for it? Should he stay? His inner struggle must have showed on his face seeing that Inoichi gestured for him to sit on the stool. "I promise on the namesake of my clan that I will not hurt or harm you. I also know that curiosity is an annoying thing, so you may ask your question, if you choose to, that is." Naruto slowly walked over to the gestured stool facing Inoichi the whole time. Once fully situated on the stool, Naruto played with his hands idly as he averted his gaze. He spoke in a small and quiet voice. "Why you have a compound behind your shop?" Inoichi face faulted. Out of all the things he should have and could have asked, he asks that question. Inoichi snorted with amusement and made an even louder snort at the affronted look the boy took at his first snort. "What? It's a good question. A compound behind this tiny shop, how is that even possible?" Naruto defended. Inoichi let out a good-natured laugh before answering the little whiskered boy's question. "I never said that our compound was behind this shop." Seeing that the boy was about to argue, he held a hand up and asked, "Do you recall what I said? You said this is the compound shop, so that means the Yamanaka compound is behind it. And that makes sense since Ino-chan went out the back." Inoichi held an amused smile. "While I indeed said that this is the compound shop, this by no means mean that the compound is behind it. In fact, many compounds have shops like the Akamichis and their restaurants, the Naris and their pharmaceutical shops, the Abarames and their." Inoichi blinked. "Actually, I don't recall what they actually sell." Inoichi gave a sheepish grin. Naruto found himself easing down as he was steadily drawn into the conversation. So much, in fact, when Inoichi asked him why he impersonated Yui-san, Naruto answered in full with all details, including the events that had led up to his henge of Yui-sensei, whom Naruto knew was close to Iruka-sensei. After all, the man was like a father to him. Inoichi nodded throughout the boy's tale and felt sympathy towards his plight. No human being should ever be shunned and forced to undergo a henge just by minor things. "Naruto, is it really so bad to have a new sensei?" Inoichi asked dryly. "Change is bad." Naruto immediately barked. Inoichi's sweat dropped. "Listen, I know of Kakashi Hatake and met with him a couple times, and though I don't know him all that well, I know that he is a good and honest man." "How do you know if he's a good man if you don't know him all that well?" "Ah, you don't seem too knowledgeable about the clans and their specialty, do you?" Naruto frowned. "I'm only 10 years old. Regardless, you should learn about things like this in class." Naruto suddenly felt himself becoming miserably smaller as he re-averted his gaze downwards. He whispered in a barely audible whisper, I have no one but Gai-sensei to teach me anything. Iruka-sensei was the last one to teach me anything at the academy, but he." Inoichi held a hand up. "I understand, Naruto, no need to explain anything." The Yamanaka clan leader took many deep calming breaths as he tried controlling the rage that was slowly festering from within. If that was his child, he doesn't know what he would have done to the people in the state of rage he surely would have been in. He made a decision. "All right, Naruto-kun, I've made a decision. If you so choose to, you may come here and I will teach you about various things that will be important to you if you want to become a serious shinobi. However, and unfortunately, I am a busy clan head, so it most likely would not be a daily thing, but I'm sure we'll work something out." Inoichi expected Naruto's eyes to be full of excitement and color, but when the whiskered child looked up, all he saw was a dull vibe and a fragile sense helplessness in the once vibrant azure eyes. Why would you do that for me?" No one ever does anything that kind of thing for me. Inoichi gave the boy a resounding, then allow me to be one of the rare few. However, I will not force this choice upon you, so you may take as long as you want. Naruto's vacant expression gazing back was the only answer Inoichi received. The clan head sighed as he went to retrieve some flowers. Here boy, you may leave with these flowers, come back anytime you want to. The Jinchuriki hesitated for a few moments before finally relenting. Arigato. Naruto took the flowers and left with a lot on his mind. Inoichi, on the other hand, decided to have a chat with his daughter. He was going to drill into her the fact that their family jutsu was to ever be used on another Konoha citizen unless directed by authorities. Even then it was an iffy matter. Regardless, she was to never use the family jutsu on a certain blonde Jinchuriki. Ever. So caught up in his thinking, Naruto didn't think to cover himself in his henge as he continued his trek towards his intended destination. Various villagers looked at him with disgust in their eyes. Why would the demon brat be carrying flowers? So caught up in their musings as to why the demon had flowers, they failed to notice the small canine that was tucked into the jumpsuit of said demon. The citizens of Konoha that were staring at him slowly grew angrier and angrier with each passing second. The Kyuubi brat seemed indifferent to their obvious disgust of him. In fact, he looked like he was completely occupied with some other thought. All of the spiteful villagers' minds ran along one similar thought process. How dare that brat ignore us, this won't be stood for. With an angered and knowing look, the villagers shared a glance and nodded. They would fix this issue on their own. If the shinobis of the village wouldn't finish what their precious Yondaime started, they the villagers, will. Naruto, so consumed by his thoughts, failed to see an incoming pair of ladies. I'm serious, Nai-chan. If I could eat dango for the rest of my life in exchange for. Thud. Thinking he was under an henge like he should have been, the whiskered boy glared angrily at the person who he had bumped into. Hey, what's the big idea, lady? Watch where you're going, Naruto yelled as he dusted himself off. He checked to see how Sake-chan was doing and saw that she still seemed to be sleeping. An unbelievable eye twitch briefly appeared on his face. This girl can sleep through all 3 shinobi wars. Aren't you the Uzumaki brat? Anko peered at him closely. Naruto paled. How did you know? Anko pulled a mirror out of nowhere and held in front of the boy's face. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and whiskered cheeks, looks like the only Uzumaki brat I've heard of. Naruto swore under his breath as he turned to make a run for it, but before he could take a single step, he found himself locked in place by 2 slender arms. Immediately, an odd scent of nature mixed with a feminine trait pleasantly assaulted his nose. He felt an indescribable heat rush up to his face as he felt 2 mounds of flesh press up against his small back. Why was he feeling such a weird sensation? And where do you think you're going? Anko whispered in a sensual tone. Naruto shivered. Kurenai face-palmed before she scolded her best friend. Anko, he's like 8 years old, quit it. Naruto was quick to argue. Hey other lady. I'm 10. And you grandmas must be a billion years old since you guys obviously can't tell I'm older than an 8-year-old. He held up all his fingers and shoved it towards lady who wasn't holding him. 10. I'm 10 years old, you old bats. Anko had a stupefied expression on while Kurenai simply quirked an eyebrow. The snake mistress of Konoha snapped out of her stupor with an irritated expression. We're 17 years old, you stupid little piece of. Anko. Language. He's only 10 years old. Naruto gave the red-eyed Junin a thumbs up. Thank you, Nei-chan. I'm glad you're nice, unlike some people. He gave a not-so-subtle glare towards the purple-haired Kunoichi. Kurenai managed to stifle her giggle lest she piss off easily ticked-off best friend even more than she already was. She was quick to restrain Anko as her purple-haired best friend tried demolishing the blonde child. Said blonde child took this time to observe the Kunoichis in front of him. As he took in every detail of their body, he realized that the Nei-chans were both really pretty. Anko, calming down somewhat, noticed that the Jinchuriki was staring at them. She turned her smirking face towards Kurenai. Look. He's staring at us. He's a little pervert. Naruto was brought out of his reverie when he heard those words. Feeling an embarrassed blush creeping up his face at being caught on blatantly staring at their body even if it was unintentional. Spluttering, The boy spoke in an extremely defensive tone, no way. I would never. I don't like grandmas, you stupids. Anko and Kurenai shared a look before one giggled behind her hand while the other laughed boisterously. Anko looked at the pouting boy's face. Say Gaki, what were you Eve? My name's Naruto Uzumaki Dadbeo. Naruto boldly interrupted. He felt rather comfortable with the two Nei-chans in front of him, seeing that he felt no killer intent from them. There was also something different about them. If his 10-year-old mind had to put words to it, it was as if they were outcasts in a way. Regardless, they seemed like nice enough people. Then again, Mizuki hid his intent well enough, and these kunoichis felt stronger than the white-haired Tem if their chakra, tank, was anything to go by. So, maybe he should keep his guard up just in case. Offhandedly, he briefly wondered how he knew how much chakra they had before shoving that thought to the back of his mind. The purple-haired one brought out a kunai and licked it in a seductive manner. Yep, he was definitely keeping his guard up. Anko gave Naruto a lecherous grin. I'm the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko, how do you do? She gave her kunai another lick and her lecherous grin grew even wider when the boy shivered. Naruto-kun. She made sure to punctuate each syllable with a flirtatious tone. Kurenai shook her head in amusement with a tiny exasperated sigh. My name is Yuahi Kurenai. It is also a pleasure to meet you Naruto-kun. She couldn't help but add her own little seductive enunciation to the familiar suffix. Needless to say, Naruto was one flustered Jinchuriki. He tried speaking back casually but found himself as a stuttering mess. Oh. Nice to meet Yua Anko-san and K Kurenai-san. Kurenai found herself enjoying the situation. She was known as the young ice queen of Konoha, because she never enjoyed any form of conversation with men. Yet here she was, talking with a boy and enjoying the tiny banter with her best friend. After several minutes of teasing the flustering boy, Anko voiced a question when she finally noticed the flowers in his hands. What's the flower for Gaki? Kurenai was not known as the Genjutsu mistress for nothing. Considered a prodigy in her own rights, she had to develop a keen eyesight. So, because of this trained ability, she did not fail to notice the subtle change of nervousness in the blue-eyed blonde, one from embarrassment from not knowing how to react to this foreign situation to one of a guarded nervousness. His tone of voice and speech made it all the more obvious. Oh, why Jay just for a friend. Naruto subconsciously brought the bouquet of flowers around his back so the front of his body was blocking it. Anko, being one of the accomplished head interrogators at the TNI and an accomplished kunoichi, noticed the subtle gesture and tilted her head. Was the boy scared of them? She looked at her best friend and they briefly shared a knowing look unnoticed by the boy. Feigning pretense, Anko spoke loudly, "Ah well. Look at the time. I forgot I had something to do at this specific time and Kurenai-chan here was supposed to help me. Let's go Nai-chan." Naruto narrowed his eyes in suspicion before letting it go. What they were gonna do was none of his business. He nodded and gave a polite bow. See you around Kurenai-san, Anko-san. They gave a cheerful goodbye and then shunshined out of view. Deciding that he wasted enough time already, he began a full-blown sprint towards the hero's monument, a monolith constructed for all those who had died in battle for the village. He didn't mind talking to those kunoichis but he needed to vent and this was most comfortable way for him. Unbeknownst to the child Jinchuriki, a pair of kunoichis were watching him from out of sight. Kurenai spoke first. Seems as if he's heading towards the monuments. Anko agreed. Seems like it. Let's follow him Nai-chan. The Genjutsu mistress frowned. Even though he is a child, privacy is a right everyone should be able to enjoy Anko-chan. The Tokubetsu Junin rolled her eyes. Whatever, I'm going anyways. Come if you want to. She blew a tongue at her best friend before trailing the blonde from a distance. Kurenai sighed and went after both her best friend and the blonde Jinchuriki somewhat grudgingly with a tiny bit of curiosity motivating her to follow. Even she wasn't immune to curiosity. It was sunset when he finally reached the site that was dedicated to the fallen shinobis. He kneeled down in front of the monument that held Iruka's name and prayed for him briefly before standing up and dusting himself off. He walked slowly towards the edge of the forest before walking through the thin tree lines. He walked carefully for 10 minutes avoiding thorns and other irritable greenery before finally coming to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a makeshift grave that Naruto had handmade with what he could find in the forestry in and around Konoha. It was as good as it was going to get for a 10-year-old. There was a crudely crafted wooden cross-shaped stake stuck into the ground that was about a foot tall. In the middle of the cross dangled his deceased sensei's headband. The cloth was somewhat loosely tied on the horizontal inner edge of the cross to keep it from falling. Naruto set the flowers down next to him as he sat in a cross-legged position. The blonde pouted as he began talking to his sensei. He began with the infuriating event that involved Guy and Kakashi that made him come this way. He then recalled the incident with Inoichi. So get this, Iruka-sensei, after I get knocked out somehow, I wake up on Ino-chan's lap. Crazy, right? But get this, that's even the craziest part. So I saw Inoichi and, be prepared, he wants to teach me. Naruto frowned, but I don't know, sensei, should I? Every time I trust someone, they always end up hurting me. I don't know if I can handle another betrayal. Naruto lied down in defeat with a sigh. Whoosh. Naruto shot up at the weird sound that was similar to a loud brush of wind. He looked around and saw something that should have been impossible. How? The boy whispered hoarsely. There, in front of his shocked eyes, was one very much alive Yumino Iruka. An eye-crinkling smile appeared on the face of Iruka. Is that how anyone greets their favorite sensei, Naruto? Naruto's vision blurred with tears as he rushed to engulf the man in a hug. Wrapping his arms around his sensei as he apologized over and over again, I'm so sorry, sensei. I'm sorry. If only I wasn't such an idiot. Iruka held the boy back at arm's length and looked at him seriously. Naruto, never ever do I want you to apologize for that. I did what I thought was right and I never want you to think that what happened was your fault, understood? Naruto wiped at his tears and sniffled, but Iruka-sensei. If I didn't listen to Mizuki Tem, then you. Listen to me, Naruto. Iruka spoke softly. Instead of reflecting on the past, I need you to be a stronger one for your loved ones in Konoha. Naruto stared sullenly at his sensei. But, I had no one else but you, sensei. Iruka shook his head. You baka, Naruto. You really have no one else left in the village that you care about. The last person was Itachi and he was. That's not what I asked, Naruto. What about the Hokage? The boy's answer was hesitant. Oh, I guess I forgot about Gigi. What about your classmates? Naruto's mind briefly flashed towards Ino-chan. The boy pouted. Fine, Iruka-sensei, I guess you're right. The scarred Chunin nodded in a smug knowingly manner. Of course I am. Now, tell me what's the deal with Inoichi-san? After Naruto explained in depth about what had happened between himself and the clan head of the Yamanakas, Iruka held a thoughtful pose. So you say you blacked out after he held his hand like this? The Chunin mimicked the XT and I's clan jutsu's hand seal. At Naruto's fervent nod, Iruka frowned. He used the Shintention no jutsu on him. That must have been dangerous. Still, Inoichi was a pretty good guy from when I worked with him. Naruto, I think you should go ahead and follow up on his lessons. It'll be good for you. Actually, you know what? As your sensei, I order you to go to him. Naruto frowned. Wait, how are you even here? Shouldn't you be? You know, he awkwardly gestured at the burial site he made for him, in there. He waved his hands around. Wait. Before you answer that, how come there aren't any funeral service or graves for all shinobis? Iruka returned a sad smile. That is something you can ask Inoichi-san, Naruto, for everything you've done for me, for giving me a family and being gone in my absence. But you're right, I do not belong here, it's time for me to return, goodbye. And just like that, Iruka whisked away like dust particles to a strong wind. At the disappearance of his sensei, Naruto felt his eyelids get heavy as he slowly opted to take an involuntary nap. As soon as his eyes were closed, the air around where Iruka stood standing previously shimmered and revealed a purple-haired kunoichi in a trench coat. Next to her, appeared her crimson-eyed best friend. I deserve an award for my acting. Right, Nai-chan? Kurenai leveled her with a glare. First of all, it was my genjutsu that allowed you to play the part of Iruka-san, and second of all, we're gonna be paying our respects to him. It's not kind to impersonate the dead Anko. Anko sighed. I know, I was just curious and there was an opportunity that presented itself and I took it, but I agree, we should go pay our respects at the monolith. Kurenai nodded. After her and Anko followed Naruto to the hero's monument, they were immensely surprised to see that Naruto had gone off into the nearby trees to a makeshift grave. Already knowing about the boy's status as a Jinchuriki and the village's reception towards him, they knew that there were few that treated the boy with kindness, and Iruka was one of them. After the purple-haired Tokubetsu Junin heard that the blonde confessing to him having a run-in with Inoichi, Anko's old boss at T&I, their curiosity skyrocketed to the point where Kurenai listened to Anko's plan of wrapping her in a genjutsu of Iruka so they could pry information out the whiskered child. It worked too well. Anko seemed to have realized this too, seeing as to how easily she agreed to paying her respects to the deceased Chunin. She glanced back at the sleeping boy as she walked away and thought about how much of a good-natured child he was, even though he was hurt mentally and physically so many times by Konoha. A determined expression came across her face. She was going to the Sandaime to perhaps teach the boy. He most definitely needed someone he could trust, and she was willing to be that person. After all, it was the least she could do, since she basically broke several laws to satisfy her own curiosity. Noticing that her purple-haired friend wasn't alongside her, Kurenai looked around only to see that Anko was gazing intensely at the boy. Anko, are you okay? The young snake mistress of Konoha pursed her lips and answered several moments after, yeah, it's just I see a lot of me in him, the way they treat him. She shook her head, never mind. Let's get going. With a wide smile, Anko skipped off towards the monolith with Kurenai looking on after her. The red-eyed Junin had a sad and knowing look. Anko. X. He stood in front of the compound shop in his henge of another random civilian. Naruto peered into the flower shop through the window nervously. It was a new day, and after yesterday's talk with Iruka, whom Naruto knew, according to himself, wasn't real but rather a figment of his imagination due to his deep subconscious that was still emotional. He figured it had to be something like that. A dream or something. Or maybe he was crazy. Being nervous, antsy, and preoccupied with his thoughts, Naruto's henge slowly glitched out as the tall random-bodied illusion shrunk into the tiny blonde. He immediately made for another transformation, but it came out as a blotched and pale version of himself. He looked around and saw that a few villagers were looking at him suspiciously while a couple of them snarled at him, indicating they saw his real identity. Cursing, he looked around briefly inside through the window and saw that no one was there. Deciding that maybe he should just try and come back another day, he made to run away, especially since he couldn't get his henge to work properly. However, just as he was about to take a step away from the shop, the door swung open rather violently. Thud. Daddy. Naruto is here. Naruto froze as his henge completely went away to reveal his true self, He turned around with a perplexed look on his face. Ino-chan. At his words, Sake-chan's head slowly roused itself from Naruto's jumpsuit in a drowsy manner. Ino squealed at seeing Naruto make such an adorably confused whiskered face before pausing in her thoughts. She studied Naruto's face carefully and thought to herself, since when was Naruto this? She couldn't bring herself to admit the fact that Naruto was pretty. You alright there, Ino-chan? Oh, of course I am. It was just, you know your dog. That's right. Just your dog is all. Ino mentally patted herself for coming up with such a clever excuse, though her face was flushed a shade of red. Okay. Naruto shrugged. Anyways, I was just gonna go away. Naruto. You made it. Inoichi had a pleasant smile on his face as he ushered both the children into the store. Looking around at the villagers that were not so subtly glaring at the whiskered boy previously around his store, he sent them a glare spiked with some killer intent, which achieved the result of them looking away uncomfortably. Inoichi nodded to himself in satisfaction and put on the closed door sign. Naruto paid rapt attention to Ino as she babbled about the different kind of flowers and their meanings. The boy looked rather eager to be learning about the flowers and their values. Inoichi's soft smile disappeared when he saw his daughter about to step on a small sharp piece of pot that would surely pierce her thin sandals and into her flesh. Ino-chan. Watch out. As fast as he was, Naruto reacted a bit faster and was able to reach his daughter because of their already close distance. Ino felt a rush and saw a blur of orange, and she suddenly felt warmth engulf her. Ino recovered from her sense of vertigo and bewilderedly looked around only to make eye contact with deep-sea blue eyes. She looked down at the floor and noticed the stray piece of sharp ceramic jutting upwards. The slowly returned her gaze to the luring eyes of a certain boy. Immediately putting together the pieces on what just transpired, Ino found herself burning up from being in such a close proximity with Naruto and being in his arms. She spoke. YUJZTSNGNNEDM. She tried to at least. Naruto scrunched his eyes slightly in confusion. What? The Jinchuriki looked at Ino's father in referral towards his daughter's attempt at speech. What? However, Inoichi had on a strange expression on his face that Naruto couldn't really identify. The clan head of the Yamanakas blinked in rapid owlish fashion as he watched his daughter stammer uncontrollably and backing out of the boy's embrace slowly. After muttering out a few incoherent words and phrases, Ino darted out the back door of the shop. Naruto, ever so curious, began to follow after Ino. Inoichi realized that his daughter was beginning to be infatuated with the blonde Jinchuriki, so he quickly gripped the boy in steely grip. Come Naruto, we'll begin your lessons now. But Ino-chan seemed a little. Lessons. Now. Inoichi sternly said with a way too wide of a smile. Naruto gulped. Okay. So they went into knowledge of what Inoichi thought a shinobi should know. This ranged from politics, ninja arts, elements of ninjutsu, chakra techniques, psychology, and even manners. For several weeks, they went into these topics in a considerable amount for a 10-year-old. Inoichi was actually quite proud with how well Naruto took in his words. After the first day, the boy had said he wanted to try a new way of learning better, so he summoned 9 other Kage Bunshins. This way, he heard the lessons 10 times a day. It was quite an efficient way to learn. This went on steady until one day, Naruto came up to Inoichi with a question. Inoichi-sensei, I had a question regarding what happened to shinobis after they, kicked the bucket. Naruto finished awkwardly. The clan leader frowned. Well, let's see. No, not that, Naruto hastily interrupted. I meant how come some shinobis don't get funeral services and things like that. I remember one time when I was little, one of the daimyos that passed away had a big ol' funeral thingy. I guess what I'm asking is, Naruto hesitated a bit before continuing. How come Iruka-sensei didn't have one? Naruto laid the flowers down horizontally at the base of the buried stake before anger started welling up inside of him. As he learned, it was very uncommon for anyone in Konoha to have a proper burial unless they were someone of importance. Much like the Hokage or an important clan head or political figure. Naruto clenched his fists. But not some clanless shinobi like Iruka Umino. Someone like himself. They were unimportant. He took a deep calming breath and relaxed his clenched fists. This is why I'm gonna become stronger. For Iruka-sensei. I will get stronger, sensei. Naruto vowed as he dipped his head. I will change the world for the better, Dadbayo. Sounds of twigs being crushed crackled upon the evening sky. That is a very bold claim, Naruto-kun. Emotions ran wild as the Jinchuriki instantly recognized the voice. Sadness. Rage. Betrayal. Naruto whispered response was low with barely suppressed anger as his sapphire blue eyes met an impassive charcoal gaze. Itachi. Naruto stood defiantly with a hardened face. Despite trying to keep himself calm and collected, the Jinchuriki couldn't help but clench his fist and shake with rage. With his other hand, he kept Sake-chan inside his vest with a firm grip in hopes that she would stay quiet. It seemed to be working. I see you still haven't activated the Sharingan, meaning you either can't or you haven't. Naruto ignored that statement and snarled at the other surviving Uchiha with a myriad of negative emotions. What do you want, traitor? Itachi stared at Naruto impassively for several long uncomfortable moments. Well, Naruto demanded. I see Sandaime-sama hasn't told you anything, past, present, nor future. What the hell are you talking about, you scum? You are coming with me tonight, whether you like it or not. Like hell I am. Kukuku, looks like you found him, Itachi-kun. Naruto felt an intense unpleasant shiver rack his body at the new voice that slithered into the conversation. Slick, cunning, snake-like were the words he'd used to describe the voice. Almost to back up Naruto's descriptive words, a tall, Pale-skinned man seemingly slithered out of the shadows to stand next to the traitorous Uchiha. Almost instinctively, the Jinchuriki jumped back with a guard up. This action seemed to have amused the snake Sannin. The pale-skinned shinobi chuckled gleefully, "Look, Itachi-kun. Such great instincts. Our dear Naruto-kun has so much potential for one so young, wouldn't you agree?" Itachi shrugged. "It does not matter much to me, Orochimaru. We have our orders." Naruto growled deeply, "I'm not going with any of you freaks." The blonde brought his fingers together in T formation, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Puffs of clouds formed and out came 12 Kage Bunshins. However, instead of being intimidated or even a hint of worriedness, Orochimaru licked his lips and leaned forward with anticipation. "Excellent, Naruto-kun. Show me more." Naruto knew he was outmatched, but what could he do? He couldn't run away. They'd capture him. If Orochimaru was anything like Itachi, that would mean he was strong and faster than most, if not all ninjas. There was no way he could get away from Orochimaru, much less Itachi. So he decided that he would settle for the idea of attracting as much attention to himself as possible. Hopefully, creating enough ruckus would bring help to his situation. How the hell did these two even get into Konoha anyways? Was it really that easy for the enemies to enter the village just like that? Kami, he was gonna have to scold the old man for that if he ever got out of this mess. Orochimaru, do not deviate from the plan. We are here to simply extract him and evac. Itachi frowned. This is not fortunate. At this rate, Naruto will be in the hands of death by the end of the minute. I don't think the leader would like that too much. Oh, but I wonder why our dear Naruto-kun created clones, perhaps to cause enough ruckus to alert reinforcement. At Naruto's nervous gulp at being found out, the snake sage grinned deviously. Looks like we should subdue the Jinchuriki a bit, ne Itachi-kun. Orochimaru hissed out excitedly. Damn it. They found out super fast. Guess I'll have to adapt. Wait, what did he call me? Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Jinchuriki. What is that? Power of the human sacrifice. Itachi narrowed his eyes. Do not get reckless, Orochimaru. The objective is not to kill him, but to extract him. The pale Sannin scoffed. Whatever. Now, let's take care of the 12 clones. Orochimaru paused and his eyes widened. He had counted, on instinct, how many shadow clones the boy produced in. Where is the 12th clone? Immediately, Orochimaru vanished in a blur, and along with his movement came the distinct popping that indicated all of Naruto's Kage Bunshins had been ended all in half a second. Well, all the Kage Bunshins in the vicinity. He had discreetly sent one to get reinforcement, preferably the Hokage or some Junin that was hopefully patriotic enough to aid the village. After all, the two traitors in Konoha that stemmed the leaf was obviously a threat to Konoha and her people. Hopefully, the Kage Bunshin had enough sense to henge into someone else. He didn't want the risk of no one helping simply cause it was him. Naruto gritted his teeth as his clones were dispelled instantaneously. Even after all that training, I can't hold my own for a few seconds, Hugh. As soon as the 11th pop was heard, Naruto found himself gasping for air as he was hoisted by the throat against a tree. Where did you send the last clone? Orochimaru hissed angrily. So caught up in his excitement at such a potential-filled experiment, he didn't pay attention to the clone that escaped. Naruto chuckled despite the gravity of his situation. Hey, what's wrong? Snake G got your tongue, hubby Tem. Instead of getting a riled-up response like he expected, he was dropped suddenly onto the hard ground. Naruto immediately scrambled himself upright into a hastily made guard. The pale-skinned Sannin roared with a demented laugh. Kukukuku. He threw his head back. Yes, Naruto-kun, you are wonderful. The creepy long-haired shinobi then leaned forward. Entertain me. Eyes gleaming with excited malice, Orochimaru extended his tongue into his cloak and brought out a kunai. Without warning, Orochimaru lunged forward at a speed that Naruto could not even hope to comprehend. However, the Sannin's action with obvious intent was in vain, for it was only to be met with another steel kunai. Itachi stood in front of the Jinchuriki with narrowed eyes glaring at the pale-faced man. Control yourself, Orochimaru, or I will be forced to for you. In response, the Sannin chuckled darkly. Do you truly think you would be able to stop me from what I want, Itachi-kun? No, I am a Sannin who went on par with the great salamander of He paused mid-sentence and sharply glanced over his shoulder and jumped to the side just as a barrage of kunais and shurikens sailed by him. Itachi, also foreseeing the attack, grabbed Naruto by the shoulders and forced him to lay on the ground as the sharp weapons flew overhead safely. Orochimaru tilted his head in curiosity before a nasty wide grin showed itself on his face. Kukuku, it's been a while, Anko-chan. The purple-haired Kunoichi came out the shadows with an unveiled expression of utter hatred marring her face. I don't know why you came, Orochimaru, but you die today. Orochimaru laughed loudly. So this is what your clone sent for Naruto-kun. He licked his lips and redirected his attention toward his ex-apprentice's neck. I wonder, what effects the seal had on you, Anko-chan. Maybe I will take you back with me. You're not gonna be taking me anywhere if you die, fucker. Anko snarled before lunging at the Sannin. Itachi watched briefly before turning to Naruto, only to find the spot he had thrown the boy for cover was empty. Activating his dujutsu, his eyes followed the distinct trail that was left by the boy in his haste to escape. He shook his head and calmly shunshined out the clearing. Always making things difficult, Otudo. As he ran, angry tears fell without restraint. Seeing the elder Uchiha brought raw emotions that Naruto didn't want to feel. In addition to that, he was running away from the help he had gotten. This situation was all too familiar. Kuso, I need to get help fast. Thud. Yelping from what he ran into, Naruto fell backwards onto his butt and rubbed his now bruised nose soothingly. Immediately realizing that he ran into something that felt like clothed flesh, the down boy jumped up and glared at whoever. Naruto looked around. There's no one around. He felt something brush his legs and on instinct coast his leg back for a savage kick only to stop when he noticed the cute hazel eyes of Sake-chan looking at him. Oh shoot. Sake-chan. I'm sorry. You must have fell out when I bumped into whatever. He bent down and put the puppy back into his jacket. Now you have to stay there and I promise everything will be okay. Sake wagged her tail and looked at him with her innocent eyes and gave him a lick before snuggling back into the jacket. Naruto instantly relaxed. Good girl. You have obtained a companion, I see. The Jinchuriki felt his blood run cold at the monotonous voice he was oh so familiar with. He leapt an impressively far distance for a 10-year-old and turned around with a glare. Holding a kunai he had plucked from the assault on Orochimaru, he went into a defensive stance. Why are you here, Itachi? There was no sense in running. If Itachi caught him this fast, it meant that Naruto was way too slow, even with all of Gai-sensei's training. That thought made his body tighten with anger. A small smile twitched on the elder Uchiha's lip that served to irk Naruto even more. Gritting his teeth, Naruto was about to yell before Itachi spoke. I told you, Naruto-kun, you are to come with me. And why the hell would I do that? So you can kill me. Naruto sneered. Itachi shrugged. If you do not come with me, the charcoal eyes turned red with 3 tomos spinning around them, I will kill her. With that said, he brought out a small black Tibetan Mastiff pup out. I believe you called her Sake-chan. What? Naruto ripped his jacket off and saw Sake-chan dissipate into several dark crows. When? He whispered. When you fell. He said simply. I'm sure you can piece together the rest. You are an intelligent boy after all. Give her back. Naruto roared. Come with me and she'll be safe, otherwise I will kill her. Don't you dare. Naruto growled out. Don't you dare take away the one of the few things I have left to love. Then do not resist. Came the monotonous reply. That stupid voice. Always like that. The dull tone of the Uchiha infuriated Naruto to no end. So much, in fact, that red chakra started seeping out of his pores. Give her back. Naruto roared as his facial feature began to attain more feral and blood-lustered attributes. The whiskers on his cheeks darkened and became rougher as his eyes took on a bloody red color. In addition to this, his hair became spikier and his nails elongated into claws. Itachi narrowed his eyes. Looks like the eye is not activating. A lost cause perhaps, I wonder. He glanced at the puppy he was holding by the tuft of fur on the back of her neck. Feeling the incredibly surplus of chakra coursing through his network, Naruto settled onto all fours. It just felt right. The new sense of high gave Naruto a sense of high. I can do this. I've never felt this powerful before. He glared at the man he once held a high regard to. I will kill him. I will not ask again, Naruto-kun. Come, or lose her. Naruto narrowed his red eyes. You won't be doing anything like that. As soon as the words finished, the cubified blonde launched himself from position astounding speed. So astounding, it caused Itachi to widen his eyes in surprise. Fast. He's been training. However, even despite the fact that Naruto had been training, the boy's attempt at lunging at the Uchiha had been in vain. Itachi, after all, is an S-ranked missing nin. The traitorous Uchiha sidestepped the blonde and brought out a kunai just as the boy turned around for another attack. Naruto froze. You have been warned. Slick. A pained whimper escaped Sake as Itachi sliced her stomach open. What do you think you're doing, you sick fool? It happened in the slowest of motions. His eyes were locked on the pure eyes of his puppy. The pained gaze that she returned did nothing to ease his soul. But for a split second, just as it seemed she was about wag her tail happily. Slick. A sickening fountain of blood squirted out onto a horrified face of the whiskered child. Immediately, Itachi flung the carcass of the dead puppy directly at Naruto. The body of Sake-chan skidded to a halt at his feet. The initial shock broke Naruto out of his slight demonic transformation. A demented hysteria fell upon the boy. No. This can't be real. There's no, it can't. He looked up for anything that would reaffirm in his hopeless belief of her being alive. His eyes darted wildly as he scratched at his neck, drawing blood. Suddenly, he looked up with a triumphant maniacal gleam in his eyes, a genjutsu. It has to be. He only knew of one way to break out of a genjutsu. Raising the kunai, he prepared to plunge it into his stomach. Right as the kunai was about to penetrate, Itachi appeared in front of him and shoved the body of the dog that Naruto had grown to love in a short amount of time. She is dead. There was no remorse in his voice. That's when an excruciating pain fell upon Naruto's face. To be precise, pain was felt in his right eye. Familiar howls of pain accompanied the night once again. Itachi looked on calmly as the Jinchuriki writhed in pain. He didn't want it to resort to this, but the elder Uchiha knew the pain was necessary, especially since the eye was so powerful. Putting Naruto through the pup's death was the catalyst needed. He approached the boy only to leap back as three bodies shunshined in front of Naruto. Immediately, the three new people to the scene were already at tense defensive stance. He stated their names respectively: Kakashi-senpai, Guy-senpai, Kurenai-san. It seems as if Naruto's clone managed to garner some reinforcements. Kakashi was the first to speak, though not at the traitorous Uchiha. Kurenai-san, I believe that is Anko's signature over there. Please go to her and once you see an opportunity, retreat, immediately. Kurenai nodded, more than antsy to go help her best friend. She again performed a shunshin towards the two clashing chakra signature. He turned towards the guy. Perhaps you should too. Nonsense. Itachi is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than Orochimaru. It would be unyouthful for me to not aid you. Besides, the youthfulness shines brightly within Anko-san and Kurenai-san. Guy, please, go. Guy frowned. Kakashi, you know Itachi is the more dangerous enemy here and Naruto is the priority. The rival of Guy cursed inwardly. Anko, Kurenai and Guy were supposed to back each other up. Technically, Guy shouldn't even be here. Itachi cleared his throat to retrieve their attention. Guy-senpai would not be too big of an obstacle at the moment. Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the Uchiha. The moon is bright tonight. Guy looked at his rival confusingly. What are you saying, Kakashi? That makes no sense. Itachi spoke without regards to Guy. If only the red clouds weren't wayward tonight. Kakashi instantly relaxed. I'm surprised you are the seed Hokage-sama mentioned. Itachi nodded. Guy stared confusingly at his rival. What is going on? The silver-haired Junin glanced at his fellow Junin. Recall how Hokage-sama requested a new mastership over Naruto. Well, it wasn't exactly me. Well, it was me initially, but plans changed and he needed a new sense and he gestured at Itachi. Well, you're looking at him. Guy frowned, but that makes no sense. How is an unyouthful person like Itachi in charge of? Kakashi held a hand up. I do not know the details, Guy, but this is an SS-ranked mission. No one outside of you, me, Itachi, Jiraiya-sama, and the Hokage-sama know of this. However, I will tell you this, Itachi is one of the good guys. Guy remained silent at this. The son of the White Fang turned a curious eye towards the other Dujutsu-wielding person, though I am curious how this came to be given the discrepancy of the past events. I am not privy to share any information. Itachi simply replied and moved on to the next topic. Although I suspect who will journey with me, I should still ask, which of you will be accompanying me? Guy broke his silence. This makes no sense. Why would you be one to train my student? And why the hell would one of us accompany you? Kakashi, this must be a ploy. I do not trust Itachi enough to hand over Naruto-kun. Kakashi shook his head. Guy, I personally talked to Hokage-sama about this mission, and the phrase he responded with aligns exactly within mission parameters of which we were subjected to. Guy glared at Itachi. Still, I do not believe that. Suddenly Guy felt himself losing consciousness. What did you do? The green beast of Konoha fell in a forward motion onto his knees into a slumped posture. Wordlessly, Kakashi placed his rival in a more comfortable position. Now that he is out of the picture, Kakashi-senpai, please undo the genjutsu placed upon Naruto-kun. And do not worry about Guy-senpai, he will wake within 15 minutes. Naruto was under a genjutsu the whole time. Quickly forming the required hand seal, Kakashi gathered chakra and overrode surrounding illusion. Instead of the still and lying boy he saw on the ground, he saw same boy crying with pain, all the while writhing and shaking with pain. Eyes widened with shock, the Konoha Junin turned to Itachi with noticeable killer intent. What's going on? What did you do? Never one to betray emotions, Itachi replied stoically with the same impassive face. The Sharingan, it seems to be awakening. Kakashi shook his head, already knowing how Naruto obtained the Uchiha Dujutsu. That doesn't make any sense. My Sharingan had no trouble adjusting. You did not have a demon sealed inside you, Itachi pointed out bluntly. I suppose, Kakashi conceded. He looked at his sensei's son briefly before looking back at Itachi. How do we go about this now? Itachi stared back impassively. I do not know. What? Kakashi closed his eyes and took deep breaths lest he lashed out at the Uchiha. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Again, I do not know. How the hell do you not? There was an unforeseen variable. Kakashi understood immediately. Orochimaru. Itachi nodded. I thought out various options, but I could not think of one that would not compromise my position. What do you mean by that? I am not privy to share any information. Kami, this is frustrating. I apologize, senpai. Kakashi waved him off. We need to do something about Naruto, but Orochimaru is a problem we need to tend to first. Kukukuku. No need to worry about that. I'll be gone on my own accord. The aforementioned pale Sannin stepped out of the shadows with two bodies slumped over his shoulder. With a sadistic glint in his eyes, he aimed a predatory smile towards a Jinchuriki and Uchiha. Two perfect experiments for him. Speaking of the Jinchuriki, the Sannin suddenly became malicious. The snake sage hissed at Itachi with anger. What is the wrong with my perfect experiment? What did you do to him? Kakashi found himself cursing again as he recognized the form of one Anko Mitarashi and Kurenai Yuahi on the pale-faced traitor. At this point, the Sannin was becoming hysterical. What did you do with my perfect experiment? Orochimaru bit his thumb and hissed out, Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. A giant 30 feet in length and 4 feet wide appeared. Orochimaru handed the two experiments he had obtained in his ex-apprentice and her friend to the snake. Keep them for a bit at Hideout 1209 until I come by. Before Kakashi could do anything, the snake poofed out of existence. The Sannin's eyes blazed with anger at the two Sharingan users. Looks like I'll just have to replace Naruto-kun with you, Hatake. At this, Kakashi's Sharingan activated. Orochimaru smirked. Yes, you will be a fine substitute, Hatake. Suddenly, Orochimaru cursed as he felt a familiar signature stir in the clearing they were situated in. He looked around and saw a patch of air that seemed to be shimmying and distorting. The patch of air revealed itself to be a blinking Meta Guy. Unythful that genjutsu, Guy muttered blearily. The traitorous Sannin cursed his luck. The extraction was to go without a hitch, but Kakashi and Guy were no ordinary Junins, no, they were strong, especially Guy. Himself and Itachi were supposed to be out of here in a blink of an eye with the Jinchuriki, then they would go on their way. Itachi would have carried the boy, then Orochimaru would strike. So why was their plan going to shit? Itachi's information was never faulty. It all clicked for the snake Sanin. His eyes widened with murderous anger. Itachi. You betrayed us. Orochimaru knew when to cut his loss and made to flee instantly. However, he knew that he couldn't return to the hideout of Akatsuki. Already he was a suspicious recruit to the group, no one seemed to have trusted him. In addition to the suspicion that was brewing within the organization, there was another probable cause to not return. Knowing Itachi, the Uchiha probably had already taken precaution to ensure Orochimaru is a traitor to the organization's agenda. Before he left the scene, however, he took one glance at Naruto before making a tisk noise, such potential wasted. Oh well, there would surely be more opportunities in the future. Kakashi let out a breath of relief before turning a cautious glance towards Itachi. Was it okay for him to be let go? Itachi nodded. Indeed, I have set up the necessary steps for the day he would turn against us. Kakashi nodded. He looked at Guy. Are you going to dispel that genjutsu now? Without a word, the Uchiha looked at the pseudo Guy and the image of the taijutsu master disappeared. Moments after, an area not too far away revealed a still sleeping Guy where Kakashi had left him. With Orochimaru out the way, Senpai, are you ready to leave? The silver-haired Junin sent two clone to inform of the events of today and carry Guy to safety. With everything said and out of the way, he nodded and sighed. Including what had happened to Kurenai and Anko. Needless to say, the Hokage was not going to be happy. Itachi walked over the now still and unconscious blonde Jinchuriki. Let us be on our way, Senpai. Kakashi agreed. Let's. The wielders of the Uchiha's famous Dujutsu shunshined out of the area. It was time begin Naruto's training anew. Naruto felt a wet sensation applied to the posterior of his back. For a second, he panicked thinking it was blood, but the liquid was way too thin to be blood. So he relaxed for a few minutes. The feeling was a stark contrast to the stinging sensation in his eyes. The water provided a cool floating feeling that dulled the pain in his eyes. Hesitantly and very, very slowly, Naruto lifted his eyelids in a painstakingly slow manner. As soon as half a nanometer was lifted, the boy clenched his eyes shut in fear that opening his eyes would bring about a new set of pain. He took deep calming breaths and focused on the cool liquid sensation upon his back and felt the darkness around him. That was good, it wasn't bright and blinding. Increasing his pace of breathing, he clenched his eyes even more so and decided that he would do it fast. There would be no time to think, otherwise he'd go back on his words and remain a blind rat. He sat up and seized his breathing and opened his eyes wide and gasped. His gasp, however, didn't stem from pain, but rather, clarity. Everything was so sharply clear to him. It was as if life's resolution had been cloudiness up until now. Realizing only now that he was in the confines of what seemed to be best described as sewer-like, Naruto turned his head behind to see the exact same setting. The boy frowned. This place looks never-ending. Regardless of his thought, Naruto decided that sitting in place would get him nowhere, literally. Standing up, the blonde straightened his clothes and noted that his clothes were dry. Brows furrowed, Naruto went into a crouch and dipped his finger into the shallow layer of water. Interesting, my finger stays wet but my clothes doesn't. That's cool. Naruto saw something odd within the water and peered closer. Just as the water was about to still and allow him to see the anomaly, a powerful ancient voice boomed. Yokoso, Ninjan, welcome, human. The blonde had to strain his neck to look up at the giant pair of red eyes. Who know, what are you? The Kyuubi no Kitsune gave a malicious smile. Don't pretend, you impudent fool, I know you no boy. The smile on the fox's face grew even wider. Too bad you're being drawn away. We'll continue this later. Naruto remained silent as he was being drawn towards reality. The Uzumaki's eyes never left the gaze of the ancient entity's sadistic glare. Naruto willed the constant bop of the surface he felt against his body to still with no avail. The rough movement of whatever the hell finally jerked the boy awake when he fell over onto another surface. It slowly dawned unto him that his face was a bit wet and part of shirt that was close to his collarbone. He blinked and the blurriness suddenly dripped away, showing that tears were waiting in his eyes. Why am I crying? Like a broken dam, the memories flooded through his mind and he clenched his eyes with his jaws clenched at the torturing and agonizing memories. Why would he Naruto couldn't keep his stomach content down and released everything onto the surface of the floor. He rotated his body and curled his legs up into a fetal position. He whimpered and cried himself to sleep. Hours later, another particular rough bump in the road startled Naruto into consciousness. He sat up and glared before blinking rapidly due to the dryness of his eyes. In an attempt to get the crust that formed at the edge of his eyes, Naruto raised his arms. He tried to at least. However, his attempts fell short because his arms were firmly tied against his sides. He struggled against the restraining ropes but it wouldn't budge. Naruto began sending chakra throughout his body only to feel it being absorbed into the ropes. A frustrated growl ripped loose from his throat as he began thrashing violently against the restraints. I wouldn't do that if I were you. By the way, those are chakra restraining ropes. Naruto shot up and turned to the corner of what he now assumed to be the inside of a carriage. His puffy eyes fell upon a familiar white-haired man casually reading an orange book. You. Me. What the hell are you doing here? Reading. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Are you working for Itachi? You're sort of idiotic. Did you know that? Anger coursed through the Jinchuriki's veins as he snarled. Let me out of here. Kakashi finally dropped his book and looked at the boy with his one eye. He in a cool tone, oh, and what would you do? Run back to Konoha to be weak, again. Let me out and I'll show you how weak I am, you bastard. The silver-haired Junin let out an annoyed sigh. How in the world was he going to convince this stubborn mule boy that he was on his side? Naruto, you need to listen to me. Go to hell. The only way you even getting a remote possibility of getting out those chakra-absorbing ropes is if you be cooperative. Naruto shut it up, albeit with a fierce glare. Kakashi I smiled at the blonde. Okay. Now, you will now be training under my tutelage for about a year and a half. Understand? Okay, good. Without waiting for his response, the Junin opened the carriage door and jumped out. The Jinchuriki blinked owlishly at that statement. Waiting despairingly, Naruto cursed every once in a while when the method of transport hit a rough bump on the road. There was no way for him to escape. Hours later, Naruto found himself scowling while staying eerily still. There was nothing for him to do but contemplate on recent events and slowly, he's felt a rising anger. Anger at not being able to save Sake-chan. Anger at not being able to make a difference. Anger at being weak. Why is it that I can't ever do anything? Suddenly, the carriage stopped and the door opened. Kakashi poked his head in. We're here. He made a hand seal and the ropes that tied his legs together were dropped. With a moderate amount of struggle, Naruto finally managed to get up on his legs. He took small steps to the door and peered down. The drop wasn't that big, maybe 2 to 3 feet, but there was practically no lighting. Once he hopped off the carriage, he felt much better on solid ground. The constant rumbling and tumbling of being inside the carriage gave him a new sense of hatred for confined mobile transports. It was only then, after he finished appreciating the solid ground he stood on, did he realize the gravity of his situation. He carefully peered around and realized that he was in a vast cavern that seemed to stretch 300 yards in a radius. He looked up and noted that the ceiling was way up, perhaps around 400 yards. There were few torches that gave the cavern an ominous lighting. He nervously looked around, noticed there was no one around. He gulped and walked around in hopes of finding an exit. After walking for what seemed to be hours, Naruto came across a door. Thankfully it was a door that was opened via push and not knob. The only problem was that the door was more like a gate. He looked up in awe, the size similar to the barred cell that held the entity inside him. The Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto sighed. So much mystery revolved around him. As soon as he saw the giant chakra beast, he immediately understood why he was so hated. More than likely, the Kyuubi was sealed inside of him. Tales of the Yondaime stated that he had defeated the giant beast. Why would they lie? Naruto gritted his teeth. Why would the Yondaime pick him, an orphan of all people? Was it because he already had no one? Was it a random coincidence? Probably thought that a giant demon wouldn't affect an orphan's already shitty life. Naruto bitterly thought. He shook his head. He would have to find the answers after this situation he was currently in. Deciding he already spent long enough thinking, he attempted to push the door open. He grunted as he exerted as much possible force against the door while being limited in terms of mobility. The door didn't budge. Naruto growled in annoyance. He took several steps back and prepared to charge at the door when it suddenly opened. His eyes immediately took in the light in what he hoped to be outside. Soon, however, the light provided at the end was blocked by a silhouette. Yo, you found it. Naruto charged at the silver-haired Junin without a second thought. Kakashi easily sidestepped the tackle attempt. Kakashi chuckled but stopped when he noticed that Naruto had a smirk on his face. The Uzumaki's intention wasn't to hit him, but it was to run to the exit. Kakashi blinked after the boy before pulling out his orange book. He began a carefree walk after the boy. As he approached the end, he speeded up and burst through the exit and looked around in astonishment. He was on a green slab of land that stopped at a large turquoise body of still water. That, though, was not what made him look around in astonishment, and he was surrounded by what seemed to be the interior of the waterfall. At the edge of liquid curtain, there were various beds of boulders. The waterfall itself was a magical Atlantis blue. He was literally looking at the flow of the waterfall inside out. It was so tranquil and serene. Realizing he spent too much time admiring the scenery, he cursed. There was no time to be wasted on enjoying the damn view. He looked around for a piece of wood or boat. Anything that could serve as a floating device for him. He looked over his shoulder and saw Kakashi approaching casually. He cursed and stepped into the water and prepared to drown, trying to escape. Kakashi paused. Naruto, I promise I am not here to harm you. There is a greater harm out there and you need to understand that. Naruto bit his lip in hesitance and glanced into the shallow water his ankles were submerged in. Kakashi jumped at the opportunity to drive in his point. Naruto, take this into consideration. If my wishes were to truly harm you, you'd be harmed by now. Naruto chewed his inner cheeks in great thoughts. Kakashi's statement did make sense. But, why? The Junin sighed. He sat down and patted a spot near him. The whiskered blonde reluctantly walked over and plopped down cross-legged, though, it was a bit far from where Kakashi originally patted. Can you take the ropes off me at least? The silver-haired Sharingan user I smiled, maybe if you're good. In response, the boy grumbled about dumb ninja cyclops and stupid silver-haired people. Okay, explain. Being serious for once, Kakashi put down his orange book once more. It all started a decade ago. Naruto locked eyes with the Junin. I presume it started with the Kyuubi's attack. Said Junin's visage became shocked. How did you know? Did someone tell you? What do you know? Tell me now, Naruto. Naruto let out an annoyed sigh. Maybe if you stop blasting me questions, I can tell you. Now, first off, no one told me. Second of all, I just guessed. Third of all, I know that I'm in a situation that I don't want to be because of Uchihas and the Kyuubi. Since I was born on the day of the attack, it's really not that hard to piece together some things. The only thing I don't know is how I'm connected to all this. That was a lie, somewhat. As soon as he encountered the fox in what he assumed to be his subconscious, he knew that he contained the fox somehow, or part of the fox. He just didn't know how the hell it got there and why he was picked. Kakashi looked at the boy shrewdly before nodding. Okay. Anyways, as you said, leading to the day of the Kyuubi attack, there seemed to be some seeds of dissent in Konoha. Nearly everyone was aware of the tenseness of the atmosphere when it started. The animosity was directed at the Uchihas, a clan known for its confidence, so to speak. At this, Naruto scoffed. Confidence? More like bull-headed douchebaggery. Kakashi continued, unaware of Naruto's thought process. Apparently, the Uchihas were not happy with their prestige and power status in the village. Regardless, the Yondaime was able to keep their greed at bay. Unfortunately, the Yondaime died the night the Kyuubi attacked. However, the next day, we realized we didn't provoke the beast into attacking. So that begged the question, why did the Kyuubi no Kitsune attack? Almost immediately, suspicion fell upon the Uchihas due to their ocular abilities of their dujutsu. Hushed whispers here and there circulated around the village. The Sharingan users became even more reserved. Tensions increased and the village found wind of a coup d'état via Anbu. To be precise, a certain Uchiha. Naruto's mental gears wheeled like crazy. Anbu, a certain Uchiha. Itachi Uchiha, Naruto whispered. Kakashi nodded. The councils needed to take action, so they tasked a mission to him. He coughed. You know what happened next? Forced to kill his family. That's Suke. But you know what? I think that bastard deserved it. Kakashi smiled sadly. Do you really? Naruto really wanted to. The man killed innocent people and her, his companion of a short time that he grew to love. He couldn't even bring himself to say his puppy's name. I want to, but I can't. It's terrible of the council to force him to do that. No one deserves that. The elder man looked at him with a calculating gaze. Shifting a bit uncomfortably under the man's stare, the whiskered child pondered aloud, So, why did he come back? A group or someone may or may not be after you for unknown reasons. Oh, probably because of the Kyuubi inside me. Right, cause of the KY Naruto, how do you know of that? Naruto then explained to the elder man about him meeting him in the subconscious of his mind. Interesting, was all the Junin had to say. Looks like I'll have to inform Kakashi and the village. Naruto shifted awkwardly as the silver-haired man stared off into the space. So, where do you fit into all of this? I will be training you. I have to ask one more time. Itachi was forced into the massacre mission. Kakashi nodded. But that doesn't make sense. If he's not the bad guy. Naruto swallowed the lump in his throat and spoke in a small voice. Why would he kill? Naruto trailed off as unbidden memories rushed back. Kakashi sighed. I did not kill your Ninken. She is still very much alive. Naruto shot him a confused look. I didn't say you, I said Itachi. Kakashi ignored him. The ropes tied around you functions to cease flow between your tenketsus. That is including everything, from your feet, to your legs, to your head. This, obviously, I am sure you can infer, includes the eyes. The eyes? Why would that matter? The Sharingan sees through everything, something I will show you now. Kakashi sliced the rope with a simple slash of his kunai. Much like the experience in his mindscape, everything became so clear. Naruto gasped at the clarity around him. Strangely, the upgraded resolution extended to both eyes. Everything was more sharper, but there was no actual change in the settings itself. He turned his gaze to Itachi and, Itachi, where the hell is Kakashi? The Kakashi you were talking to was a genjutsu. The real Kakashi is setting traps around the perimeter because he is not privy to the information I just told you. He was just talking to me, no screw that. Prepare to die, you sick. Naruto. As I informed you, Sake-chan is not dead. The horrible experience I set on you was done through genjutsu, one that was so strong that only Uchihas with active Sharingans and few powerful individuals can break through it. I am sincere when I say this, Naruto. I never wanted to harm you, but that was the only way for things to proceed and I apologize. Itachi lowered his head and bowed. I am sorry, Ototo. The Jinchuriki hesitated for a few moments before his face hardened. Where is she then? Give her back first. That's the only way you'll have a chance of earning any type of forgiveness. That is, fair. Itachi held out a hand sign and muttered something that Naruto wasn't able to pick up. The Uchiha turned to Naruto and explained, I lifted a genjutsu in which she was in playing constantly with other puppies. Naruto nodded, satisfied at his explanation, but he offered no verbal response. He wasn't going to say jack diddly squat until he saw his damn bark. Several barks were heard from the distance. With each bark, it seemed to be drawing closer to his position. Naruto waited with impassively, but he couldn't help the feeling of desperate hope from welling up from inside of him. He saw hit his precious companion and cried out with happiness before the little ball of black fur tackled him. After several minutes of happiness and lots of licking, doubt reared its ugly head in Naruto's mind. What if this is still a genjutsu? This could be a trick too. Naruto, it is not a genjutsu. This, I assure you. Naruto placed his puppy aside and stood up, and how would I know that? You yourself just said that Uchihas and strong individuals could break free of your genjutsu. I train hard, but I know I'm nowhere near your level and I am certainly not an Uchiha. Itachi smiled. Do not sell yourself short, Naruto-kun, you are strong. But you are right, your strength does not, yet, compare to mine. The Uchiha let out an amused quirk of the lips as he saw the boy's annoyance. I suppose you're not an Uchiha by birth, but, since you do possess the clan's dujutsu, he trailed off. Naruto's mind clicked and he rushed over to the still water. His eyes widened as he focused on his left eye. His Sharingan was blazing. So, he was tasked with various training to remove his uncoordinated clumsiness. Take this task for example. Kakashi, using a variation of Doden and Futon techniques, sent pebbles of varying sizes into the air. Due to their size, and something about physics and gravity that Naruto blocked out, they fell down at different rates of speed at different locations. His objective was to catch all of them before they were to hit the ground and then return them to Kakashi. Catching small things at high speeds whilst multitasking was what hand-eye coordination training was all about. Dashing speedily to the first point, Naruto caught the pebble between his four fingers and instantly threw it swiftly towards the Junin, whom caught it effortlessly. The blonde repeated this action as he sped from spot to spot. He sighed in relief as he threw the last pebble towards his tutor. His eyes widened as he heard the faint whistling of a light pebble he had evidently missed in. Tap. A pebble hit the ground. Ma, looks like you missed one, Naruto-kun. Kakashi happily smiled. Naruto straightened up and smirked. No, I didn't, Kakashi-sensei, and you know that. Kakashi turned his head curiously. Whatever do you mean? Obviously, you weren't able to. I saw you throw the extra pebble when I was finished with returning the original set of rocks. So technically, you cheated. And since you cheated, we're moving on to the next part of training, as per our agreement. The Junin chuckled. I'm surprised you caught that. It was the first time I did it during this exercise and I'm sure I did it discreetly. The whiskered blonde pointed toward his left eye. The Sharingan is a pretty nice bonus to reflexes and sight. He stretched his limbs. I think I'm all good in my coordination now. Kakashi nodded his agreement. I agree, I think it's time for the next step. Naruto rushed over in excitement. The blonde flailed his hands wildly as he spoke in an eager voice, yes. So what's next? Jutsus. Fire jutsus are more cooler, or lightning. Those are pretty cool too actually. Chakra control. Oh yeah, chakra control would totally be badass too. Wait. What? Why the hell do I have to? The Sharingan, Kakashi interrupted, provides heightened vision and heightened chakra control. It was thought that people who possess the Byakugan and Sharingan were automatically born with near-perfect chakra control. See, why do I need to? First off, you weren't born with the Sharingan, and this thought held true only because no one ever believed a Jinchuriki should be in possession of a Dujutsu. It was widely accepted that giving a Jinchuriki a Dujutsu was too much power for an individual. Because of this, he stared at the boy. No information was obtained in regards to the effect of a Dujutsu had on a Jinchuriki. Do you follow thus far? Naruto nodded slowly. I think so. So you're saying that no container ever had a Dujutsu like me, so we don't know the effect of a Dujutsu combined with a Jinchuriki, but I feel as if my control is a bit better, I think. Kakashi nodded. My theory is that you have so much chakra, that not even the famous Sharingan could give you the excellent chakra control that any other shinobi that possessed a Dujutsu would have. I see. So, how are we starting the exercises today? Naruto-kun, I know you know the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, but do you know its secret? The boy frowned. That the memory returns to the user. The silver-haired Junin sported a surprised look at his answer before nodding. Yes indeed, surprised you know that actually, but there is more to it than just that. So do you know? Naruto shrugged. I dunno, that's all Guy-sensei told me. The elder of the two sighed before shaking his head. This training method is only unique to you. Said method can cut down years of training into a mere month. Months of training turn into days and days of training turn into seconds. The secret, in addition to receiving memories of clones, you can also receive chakra-based experience from them as well. This means that I can train on chakra-based exercises with my clones and get their experience. Naruto nearly shouted. At Kakashi's nod, Naruto jumped high into the air with exuberance. Holy shit, I'll be the greatest shinobi in no time. The Junin looked over at the boy appraising Ly. I have no doubt you will be one of the strongest to ever live, said Junin cleared his throat, though, Naruto, you must realize that with your level of chakra, it will be even a while for you before you get excellent control with the new training method. In an instant, Naruto's demeanor changed into a more sullen one. Shoulders slumped, the boy moaned pitifully into his hands, what? That is so freaking lame. Kakashi shrugged. Since you can only create 100 shadow clones, it can't be helped. I still don't see why chakra control is that important. I know I have a ton of chakra, I can feel it. Even more than you, I understand why I need to be careful with how I spend my chakra. Kakashi quirked an eyebrow. It is widely known that Tsunade of the Densetsu no Sanin, legendary 3 ninjas, exhibits the perfect control of chakra. If she had your reserves, she'd be able to make all of your jutsus 100 times more effective. At the boy's widened stare, Kakashi continued, now, more importantly, what did you mean by saying that you could feel chakra? The child pursed his lips. I dunno how to explain it. I can feel my own chakra, and when I'm close enough to another person, I can feel and see their reserves too. Throughout his explanation, Naruto used wild hand gestures in a weird roundabout way to convey his message, as if the gesture explained everything that his words couldn't. In response, the Junin nodded. Interesting. Looks like you have the making of becoming a sensor nin. Sensor nin, a shinobi who is capable of detecting others via chakra, Kakashi answered. Fearing that the boy might get too big of an ego, the silver-haired shinobi continued, though, it's not a for sure thing, Naruto. You should be aware that at your stage, from your description, being a sensor is practically useless for now. Unless you can develop your skill to a proficient degree, you shouldn't rely on it. Deflated, the blonde slumped. Don't worry, Naruto. Since you can create 100 clones, you'll be able to obtain proficiency in control, sensing, and few other things. Naruto looked up instantly. If I can do more than that, how long would it take? Well, it would depend on how much you could make. Obviously, the more you can do, the faster everything will get done. He looked at the blonde. However, that most definitely means you shouldn't try creating more clones than you're capable. I've read the reports, and a safe amount of clones for you should be 50 clones. He expanded with his reasoning at the boy's confused face. Though your limit is probably 100, based off of certain reports, 50 clones would be more efficient, quality over quantity. So hypothetically, if I can make 1,000 clones, how much would be efficient for training? Hypothetically speaking, I would say around 300. But, since you can't even hope to create half of a fraction of that amount. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Mass Shadow Clone Technique. Massive plumes of smoke filled the volume of the large cavern. Kakashi quickly unveiled his Sharingan and both eyes widened in awe. Roughly 300 Kage Bunshins of a certain blonde Jinchuriki were smiling smugly at him. Lifting his headband to use his Sharingan, the silver-haired Junin counted the amount of clones accurately. 277 Kage Bunshins were standing around idle, albeit in a rather proud fashion, in the cavern. Aha, so you do have the Sharingan. Naruto exclaimed while pointing a finger accusingly at the silver-haired man's left eye. Kakashi shrugged with a head tilt. Yes, I know, I could have told you that if you simply asked. There is no point in trying to deny it. Wait, Naruto faltered, what? You would have told me if I asked. Yep, why wouldn't I? Kakashi curiously asked. Oh, Itachi said something about not his place telling me about your eye, Naruto admitted rather bashfully. Kakashi stared off into nothingness. Naruto shifted uncomfortably as the awkward silence reigned on. Suddenly, Kakashi was in front of him, less than an inch from the whiskered boy's face. Letting out a startled yelp, the blonde jumped back several feet at the sudden close proximity of the other Sharingan user. Oi, what's the big idea? Naruto shouted. Naruto, did Itachi say anything else? The questioned child held a scrunched up face in obvious thought before lying. Nope. All he said was that his mission was done or something, and yeah, he mentioned something about you'll be taking care of everything from here on out. And Naruto furrowed his brows, trying to think if he could add anything else to his lie to make it more plausible. With nothing coming to mind, the boy reiterated his point once more. Yep, that's all. Kakashi stared hard at the boy with a neutral gaze for what seemed like an eternity. A single bead of sweat dropped down the boy's forehead and said boy gulped nervously. Just when it seemed like all hell was about to break loose, the adult of the two spoke, causing Naruto to flinch. Okay. Expecting a rather volatile answer, Naruto cringed behind his hands before peeking out with a gaping expression. Okay. That's it. Okay. Just like that. You believe me. Kakashi shrugged. There's no reason I should disbelieve you, but, perhaps, if you remember something that you forgot to tell me, you will speak on it. Naruto nodded his head mutely. Satisfied yet unsatisfied with the boy's answer, Kakashi mentally sighed. He was sure there were things that the boy was leaving out, but there was nothing he could do that would make the young Jinchuriki tell him anything. Well, he could torture him, but that would probably be wrong. Probably. Kakashi saw the boy waiting expectantly for an explanation on how he obtained his eye, no doubt. The Junin then pondered on how much of the truth he should let out. His eyes wandered lazily over to the face of the blonde, and he was painstakingly made aware of how much the boy resembled his deceased best friend. It was truly frightening how much of a resemblance Naruto had with Obito. Just as Naruto was about to comment on the stare that the Junin was giving, the man began speaking. The Yondaime Hokage wasn't, obviously, always a Hokage. At one point, he was a Junin, and for most Junins, it was common practice to take up a team of Genins to train in tactics and leadership. I, along with 2 Genins, was a part of his team. Naruto's eyes widened. This man was a part of the legendary Yondaime cell. He always heard about them throughout the lectures of the academy, though what he heard was brief due to the fact he was always getting kicked or skipping class in favor of pulling off one of his infamous pranks. He tried desperately on recalling any piece of information on the team of his idol, the 4th, to no avail. Kakashi noted the effect of his words on the boy before continuing. My teammate was also an Uchiha. Due to some unfortunate circumstances, I lost an eye, and my teammate decided to transfer the Sharingan over to me before he passed. Despite the obvious tragedy, Naruto couldn't help himself from being eager for more of the tale. He waited expectantly once more for several minutes before it was obvious that the Junin wasn't going to continue his story. That's it, Naruto cried out. Kakashi smiled at the child. Yup. Naruto fell over in disbelief before jumping back up. But, the details. What about the details? Bark. Bark bark. Apparently Sake-chan agreed. Classified. Grr. Fine. Let's get training then. Naruto said irritably. Perhaps you should have some clones fetch leaves from outside. Kakashi continued smiling at the blonde before adding, you're more than welcome to join them in their scavenging. Muttering a quick, stupid silver-haired Junins and their dumb smiles, before mentally commanding all of his clones to retrieve the mentioned greenery. He himself walked outside with a huff. His curiosity was peeved by the man's unfinished tale, and the continuous smile the man gave him frustrated the boy to no end. Come on, Sake-chan. Let's go get some leaves, you can have a potty break too. After several hours of compiling a nice and mountain-sized pile of leaves inside the cavern, Kakashi called out a halt. That's enough, Naruto. Kakashi shouted. Now come over here so I can show you what you're doing next. Naruto grumbled and mumbled rebellious and insulting phrases, all the while walking over to the Junin. Choosing to ignore the boy's dark mutterings, Kakashi spoke with his patented smile. This task is what you'd be learning if you were still at the academy. Now, in this exercise, you'll be taking a leaf and keep it afloat upon your forehead. Naruto scoffed and took a leaf and placed it on his forehead, using a finger to hold the greenery with a scowl on his face. I don't see how this is gonna make my chakra better at all. Naruto noticed that Kakashi's smile looked the same as it would any other second of the day, yet it somewhat contained an air of haughtiness. Now hold it in the air 1 inch from your forehead, and do it without any help. Naruto dropped the leaf in surprise. And how the hell am I supposed to do that? Naruto finally found some emotion show itself in Kakashi's smirk. The elder Sharingan user spoke gleefully. Magic. Naruto groaned at the response and shuffled off towards the pile of leaves. Grabbing one, he stared at it intently as if an intense observance would yield answers. Kakashi also observed the boy's action amusingly before he noticed something. Sake-chan was it. The puppy had not moved a single inch from her spot and nervously looked at the older man. Kakashi knew the puppy was a ninkin, so that meant that the canine could also train. You go work on this too. Naruto smirked when he felt his puppy trudge grudgingly towards him and plopped next to him. He couldn't help but taunt his puppy a bit. Ha, Sake-chan. Looks like we're in this together. In response, the puppy smiled viciously before sinking her teeth into the blonde. Ow. Mother of all fuck. 3 weeks later. Naruto halted his taijutsu-only spar with Kakashi. Nay Kakashi-sensei, I know that we won't be returning to Konoha for a long time, but you think I can get a reference or an estimate as to when we'd be returning? Kakashi snorted with amusement. He had given the boy a dictionary, despite Naruto's protest of him being good enough, so that the boy didn't sound like such a simpleton with his words all the time. Ever since, the boy had been slowly, but surely, incorporating bigger and slightly more complex words into his everyday conversation. I suppose in 3 years perhaps. Naruto spoke in an aghast tone. What? The blonde nearly shouted his next words, but what about graduation? The exam is in 2 years. Actually, Kakashi began correcting, due to the massacre, the exam has moved up an additional year, so instead of this year's Academy Genins being the standard age of 12, they'll be 13. Makes sense. Naruto sat back down with a thoughtful expression, so that means I have a little under 3 years to train. Awesome. The elder Sharingan user nodded. It will be a most fruitful time for your training to bear results, especially since you have the Kage Bunshin method to aid you. Kakashi looked at the hundreds of clones around them practicing various chakra control exercises that were more sophisticated than what Naruto was currently doing. The puppy's chakra reserves were sizable for its size, but it was exponentially smaller than Naruto's. This notion, however, displeased and pleased Naruto at the same time. It wasn't jealousy per se, it was just that he was happy that his dog was making progress, whereas he himself couldn't progress at the rate that his partner was excelling at. There was no envy in his feelings, just a sense of self-disappointment that even with his clones, his chakra control wasn't as good as Sake-chan's. Naruto, I know what you're thinking. Determination lit up in Naruto's eyes as the boy resumed the spar with renewed vigor, causing Kakashi to flinch at the sudden ferocity. It seemed as if the boy's determination renewed all the shadow clones with a new gusto. Yells and encouraging grunts were heard throughout the cavern as the clones resumed their exercises. Taijutsu was normally something Naruto did on his own, but luckily for him, Kakashi conveniently knew Goken Iron Fist. Though the man didn't consider himself a master, he was still quite proficient in the style Guy created. At first, Naruto had mixed feelings when Kakashi approached him and suggested a spar instead of the boy just practicing the intermediate katas of Goken. Imagine the great surprise and anger that sported on the blonde's face when the elder man took up the same stance as him. At first, Naruto dropped his hands and stared at the man owlishly. What are you doing? Sparring. Kakashi innocently replied. I know that, Naruto growled. What are you doing in that stance? Oh, this. It's a taijutsu style I know pretty well. Now enough talking, and attack. That was exactly how the conversation had started when they first sparred. Of course, it ended in a loss at Naruto's end. His loss partially stemmed from the fact that Naruto attacked in rage, seeing his original sensei's style that was special to him, and Naruto drove the blonde into blind anger. This factor caused Naruto rush and lose his cool. This ultimately led to his first defeat at his new sensei. Well, that and the fact that Kakashi was way more experienced in fighting than Naruto was. Panting at the beatdown he received moments ago, he asked from ground he was lying on, tell me, Pant. Did you, Pant, steal the style with your dujutsu? Kakashi squatted in front of the boy with that same old eye smile, and if I did steal it? What are you going to do? Whoa. Kakashi jumped out the way just as Naruto sent a kick sailing towards his face. The boy jumped with a new set of energy and a snarl on his face. Sharingan be damned, you had no right stealing Guy Sensei's technique. I know for a fact that Guy Sensei worked hard for his skills. Kakashi admired the boy's ethics behind his words with mental approval. However, he didn't have much time to admire the boy's moral conduct because he felt a presence behind him. His shadow clones. Naruto smirked. Did the Junin really think that he wouldn't use every advantage he had to defeat the older man? He currently had hundreds of clones surrounding him that was practicing chakra control. Why not utilize them? It seemed, however, that even hundreds of persons who were in the intermediate stage of Goken had no chance against a seasoned vet like Kakashi. What bothered Naruto was the fact that the man was clearing his clones with strictly taijutsu. In particular, with the Goken stance and that stance only. When they finally were down to the original, Naruto gritted his teeth in obvious annoyance. It was almost as if Kage Bunshins were useless against the higher-tiered ninjas. The technique was literally useless in direct combat. He briefly thought that he would have to formulate some methods that would help him utilize the kinjutsu to be of any efficiency when he had some time. As his shadow clones were getting decimated, Naruto ran at full speed with intentions of headbutting the Junin. It was probably a dumb idea, but he was hoping his speed and the directness of the attack coupled with his remaining clones distracting him would catch the man off guard. Unfortunately, not even his impressive speed for an academy student could catch the man off guard. Kakashi must have kept an eye on him the whole time he fought his clones because the man sidestepped the projectile that was Naruto. Kakashi called out in a scathingly bored voice, "Good idea of using your head, but perhaps you could not take to that phrase literally, nay. Perhaps throwing kunais or shurikens might have been the better option." "I don't have any kunais or shuriken." Naruto glowered. "And why is that?" Kakashi taunted. "Perhaps if you were serious about being a ninja like I told you before." Arrrgh. Naruto charged, foregoing any form of tactics he was beginning to think about. Kakashi sighed and prepped a hand to knock the boy into next week. And knock the boy into next week it did. Naruto recalled when Kakashi suddenly upped his speed and landed a vicious right hook to his temple. When he awoke, Kakashi had explained and convinced, with great difficulty, to Naruto that Guy had actually taught him the Goken when they were both younger as a thank you for always supporting the taijutsu specialist when no one else did. So here Naruto was, getting lessons and tips on the Goken, though it was by proxy from Kakashi-sensei instead of Guy-sensei, it worked just fine for him. Naruto dodged a low sweeping kick by jumping back, but as soon as he landed, he was suddenly tossed skywards as Kakashi sent an uppercut into his gut. Spit mixed with light blood were coughed out as the Junin jumped back and waited patiently for a few moments before speaking. "Come on Naruto, the real enemy won't wait for you." The Jinchuriki wiped the trailing blood that was leaking from his mouth. Spitting the mixture of saliva and blood off to the side, the blonde straightened up and growled. "Come on then.